Time to talk about water. Water is one of the few substances in the universe that has a really low molecular mass and simultaneously is a liquid at ordinary temperatures that you typically find on Earth. We got a lot of water. We think we accumulated it by collision with comets early in the Earth's history, long before life was here. And right now it's covering 75% of this planet's surface. Water is an amazingly polar molecule. And by polar, we mean that there's an unequal charge distribution, and as a result, the molecules have sticky ends and they stick to one another pretty well. The hydrogen atoms are partially positive and the oxygen atoms are partially negative. The oxygen atoms of one molecule are attracted to hydrogen atoms of other molecules, and that is the nature of a hydrogen bond. So here you can see the big blue ball from space. 75% of the surface of the planet is water. And here you have all three phases of water. You have the gaseous phase, the solid phase in the iceberg, and you have the liquid phase in the ocean. So how does this look if you took a quick look at just the structure of water? Water's got a peculiar bond angle between the two hydrogen atoms of about almost 105 degrees. And the oxygen atom is effectively able to pull the sharing electrons away from the hydrogen quite a bit. That leaves the hydrogen nucleus here and here partially exposed. And the nucleus, remember, is positive because it's got protons in it. So these little hydrogens end up with a slightly positive charge, and the oxygen, because it's hoarding the electrons that it's sharing, it's partially negative. Just anytime you share something, somebody ends up benefiting slightly more than somebody else because somebody uses the shared object more than the other. That's all that's going on here. But that sets the stage for some really amazing properties. The water striders are insects that actually walk on the surface of water simply because of this peculiar bond angle and polarity of water. Water molecules stick really effectively to themselves, and they form a viscous surface. We call this surface tension. They form a tension like a sheet that resists piercing. Now, we are too heavy, and so if we try to walk on the water, our feet sink in because our mass is, and the pressure we put on the water is greater than what the surface tension can resist. But the water striders are so light that they don't push through the surface of the water. Now you can actually confound the water strider by just adding a little bit of soap to the water. The water strider will sink in the water because soap disperses. Soap gets between water molecules and it breaks up the surface tension. And without that surface tension, the water strider cannot walk on the water. This tension that you see demonstrated here is so strong that actually the very first thing you had to do in life was overcome the surface tension of water by taking your first breath. At birth, you went from being in the amniotic fluid inside your mom's womb to the outside air. And so what your lungs did was they squeezed and they pushed out all the liquid that was inside, and then they attempted to inflate. That's like taking a balloon and having kind of a syrupy fluid in it, squishing the balloon to push all the syrup out, and then trying to just pull the balloon open and suck some air in. Doesn't work so well sometimes. Little babies have a really hard time popping those lungs open. Surface tension is a difficult thing. It's a great thing, but it's also a difficult thing. So water's high surface tension and high specific heat are caused by this peculiar hydrogen bonding capability that water has. Water doesn't just bind to itself, it's also an adhesive and binds to other things. And that's why when you get paper wet, the paper sticks to other papers and almost like a glue. That's because water molecules are forming hydrogen bonds between the different sheets of paper, making the paper essentially glued together. So water molecules are attracted strongly enough to each other, to make these amazing things possible, like the water striders walking on the water, or the cooling effect that water has when it evaporates from your skin. You're breaking hydrogen bonds when that happens, and as a result, that takes heat away from your body, and it cools you. Now, the human body is not just pure water. We are a mixture, at least. Every breath of air we breathe in is actually a mixture of dust particles. Actually, that's a suspension. The dust particles are suspended. But there's gases mixed in the air. There's maybe some of the odors of a meal that your family's making, or there's nitrogen gas, oxygen gas, there's carbon dioxide gas, water vapor. They're all mixed in there. A rock is typically a solid mixture of materials. Seawater is a mixture of salts and water and pollutants, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a solution's a little bit different than a mixture. A solution is a mixture that's evenly mixed. And solutions, you have some solutions in your body. Your blood, in many respects, is a solution, but it's also a suspension. I'll get to that in a minute. With respect to solution, your blood is fairly evenly mixed. And as a result, if we take a blood sample from your arm, we can pretty much be assured that the blood all over your body is represented by that blood sample from your arm. The solvent is the chemical in a solution that is more common, and the solute or solutes are the chemicals that are mixed with the solvent that are less common. So solutions are really common in chemistry, and they're really common in air in the room pretty much is kind of not just a mixture, but it's probably also a solution, as long as it's evenly mixed. Of course, if somebody on one side of the room passes gas and pollutes the air there, the room air is not evenly mixed, so it's really not a solution. At that point, it's just a mixture. To be a solution truly, you have to be evenly mixed. So a soda that you buy at the store, you're buying a solution. It's supposed to be evenly mixed. Every taste is supposed to be the same. Now, suspensions are a little different than the previous two in that in a suspension, you've got particles so big or chemically so incompatible that they won't stay mixed together indefinitely. And so blood is a suspension of blood cells in a solution of blood chemicals. And so the plasma of blood is pretty much a solution, but the cells in there are suspended. If you let blood sit out for a while, or if you spin it in a centrifuge, all of the suspended cells will settle out, and you can see them separated. So if you're mixing like water and salt to make a saltwater solution, just putting the salt in the water makes a mixture. Stirring it turns it into a solution. If you dropped tiny little mud particles in there and stirred it up, it'd be a suspension. But if you let it sit long enough, the dirt particles will settle out. And that gives evidence that it was a suspension. So if you let this, what looks like milk is actually water and flour. If you let this sit long enough, the flour will settle out, revealing that it was not truly a solution only, it was also a suspension. And here, this is blood here. Blood is definitely a suspension. Now, all water solutions, mixtures, suspensions, whatever, they all have acid, base, or neutral properties. Water is, by its very nature, a reactive molecule. Water molecules, when they're bouncing around, have a tendency to break into hydrogen ions, which are also known as protons, the same old protons we were talking about before in chemistry, and hydroxide ions. And these two are oppositely charged. So when water molecules are bouncing around like in a glass of water, a certain number of water molecules hit hard enough and they break into these two ions. And then these two ions, when they bounce around and meet each other, they go ahead and they reform water. So at any given moment, in a glass of water, as much water is breaking to form these ions as these ions are breaking to reform water. So why bring this up? Well, it's because if these two ions are not in balance, you either got an acid or a base. So anytime you have water, you have this ion and this ion in the watery solution, suspension, or mixture. If you add other chemicals to the water, they can make these two get out of balance, and then as a result, you have an acid, or a base. So this is a typical scale here. All living systems have to deal with the acid-base properties of solutions and mixtures and suspensions. Perfectly pure water that's distilled and has absolutely no gases or anything in it has a pH of 7. pH is a measure of the hydrogen ion concentration that's in the water. So if the pH is 7, that means the hydrogen ion concentration is 10 to the negative 7th molar, and the hydroxide ion concentration is 10 to the negative 7th molar. They're equal, and they balance out. Now, all these other things, milk, egg yolks, Rainwater has impurities in it, orange juice, beer, vinegar, carbonated beverage, gastric fluid. They all have chemicals mixed with water that causes more hydrogen ion to be present than hydroxide ion. We call those acids. On the other hand, seawater, baking soda, household ammonia, milk of magnesia, bleach, lye, they all have chemicals in that cause the hydroxide ions to outnumber the hydrogen ions. We call those bases. Generally speaking, living things are compatible with pHs of about 8.5 to about 5.5. You get much below 5, you're in trouble. Your blood has a pH of 7.4. If it goes up to 7.8, it's easily fatal. And if your blood pH goes down to 7, that's easily fatal. But you can drink a soda which has a pH of like 3, and it's not going to kill you because your digestive tract will neutralize the acidity before you absorb the soda. Basically, you don't want to expose any part of your body with solutions much higher than 11 or much below 2. Your gastric juices in your stomach are down at 1, but your stomach lining is designed to handle that. Taking anything into your mouth that has a pH less than 1, even your stomach can't handle that, and it'll burn your mouth, your esophagus, which is the tube that leads to your stomach, and everything else. So pH is kind of an important property when it comes to water and the quality of a liquid that an organism is exposed to. So I've already talked about this, but it says bases here are solutions with excess hydrogen ions. So if you take sodium hydroxide and you throw it in water, well, that's going to add a whole bunch of hydroxide ions to the water. And so then the hydroxide ions and the hydrogen ions won't be equal anymore. And you'll have more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. And as a result, you'll have a base. If you throw an acid into water, like if you throw hydrochloric acid, HCl, into water, well, now you're throwing protons into the water. Then the protons will outnumber the hydroxide ions, and you have an acid. If you throw an acid and a base together, a reaction occurs. It's called a neutralization reaction, and the acid and the base neutralize each other. Now, you're either going to end up usually with an acid or a base, depending on which one you had more of. So it's not safe to take battery acid and try and neutralize it and then drink it. Because if you didn't get the perfect neutralization, you're going to either have an acid or a base, and you're going to hurt yourself. Buffers are chemicals mixed in a watery solution that make the solution resistant to pH change. And you have your most basic buffer you have in your body, which protects you so that soda doesn't kill you when you drink it, is baking soda. Sodium hydrogen carbonate is in your bloodstream, and it prevents your blood from either becoming too acidic or too basic from just eating typical foods. All living systems employ buffers to protect themselves against foods that they have to take in. So that concludes our discussion of water. The next discussion moves into the chemical compounds found in living things.